What is up, YouTube? What Millsy, my hometown commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list with the commander in front of us on my quest to brew the Magic World. And as always, the deck list is going to be down in the description below, so if you guys like this content, hit the like button, subscribe for me, I'd really appreciate it. I got content coming at y'all 4 days a week, if not more, and I would appreciate all your support. Today we're talking about a deck that I had to cover before OTJ was done because the Precon and a lot of the new deserts really got love for Yuma. But we're going to talk about Hazezon because Hazezon is the original desert commander and got so much love in that Precon. In fact, I think personally Hazezon would be my choice of the two just because, well, if you know me by now, you know I love my token decks, and that's what Hazezon does best. But let's talk about Hazezon and what we can have some fun with here. Hazezon, Shaper of Sand, is a Naya 3/3 human warrior with Desert Walk. Creature can't be blocked as long as fitting player controls a desert. You might play desert lands from your graveyard. Whenever a desert ETB is under our control, we make 2 1/1 red, green, and white sand warrior creature tokens. So a little bit more traditionally forward landfall than Yuma. Of course, Yuma cared about some of the graveyard shenanigans a little more than Hazezon. I think Hazezon's a little more just straight up landfall, and so we're going to care about that. We're going to play a bunch of ways to make our sand warriors better, because I think at the end of the day that's important if we're going to be making them every time a desert comes in, and we have so many deserts we could play. Want to do that. And then we're going to find ways to play deserts multiple times, whether it's bouncing them back to hand, getting them to the graveyard, playing them out of the graveyard. The cool part is that Hazezon allows us to play deserts back out of our graveyard, so if we sacrifice them or mill them to certain effects, we can get them back. And I think Hazezon just gives us a great suite of abilities to really take advantage of anything we'd want to do. Well, let's get into landfall. And this is where probably some of my favorite cards in the deck are. Avenger of Zendikar, of course, great landfall payoff. Making plant creature tokens, making the plants even bigger every time every time a land comes in. Bristly Bill, every time a land comes in, can put a counter on a creature, and then for 5 mana can double all the counters on all the creatures you control. Green Sleeves is just huge in their own right, but can make 3/3 Badger every time a land comes in. And I think these making tokens when lands come in is important, because then all of our token synergies we get with our Sand Warriors, we're also getting here. Lotus Cobra can give us a mana of any color anytime a land comes in, which is really great, because even if they then come in tapped, we're still getting value. Same thing with Tyler's Provisioner. Whenever a land comes in, make a food or a treasure. We're still getting mana, even if our land comes in tap. Omnath Locust of Rage, 5/5 Elemental. Every time a land comes in, then whenever it or another Elemental dies, we can deal 3 damage to a target. Again, just those tokens, getting them out there, getting them ready to go. Getting into some of the fun ways that we can go find lands. Our Promise lets us get any 2 land cards and put on the battlefield tapped, and if we control 3 or more deserts, we then make some zombies. Our Promise is great because we can go get any lands we want to, especially deserts, once Hazezon's out. Same thing with Map the Frontier. We can search our library up to 2 basic lands or deserts, put them on the battlefield tapped. Again, as soon as Hazezon's out, we're definitely getting deserts. Well, Scapeshift's got that beautiful special guest reprint, and we're going to use it in conjunction with Splendid Reclamation for a pretty big combo in most decks. Scapeshift says, sacrificing a number of lands, search your library for that many land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, so we can sack as many as we want, go get as many as we want. Here we're going to be trying to pair that up with getting as many deserts as we can to get all the triggers of Hazezon, but you then pair this with Splendid Reclamation, which allows you to bring all lands from your graveyard back to the battlefield tapped, hopefully bringing a bunch more deserts and things like that in, and just really take advantage of the value and get all of those tokens. Crop Rotation lets us sack a land to go get a land we want, put it on the battlefield. That's pretty great, because again, we can go get a desert, or we can go get the right land we need at the right time from some of our more utilitarian lands. And then Faladar Retreat can either get us a Cat Beast or start giving our creatures vigilance until end of turn and putting a counter on them. This works really great with things like Bristly Bill, but also just makes our Sand Warriors even harder to deal with. And they're going to get even harder because we're not just playing them as 1/1s. We have plenty of ways to do this. This section is going to look really similar if you're playing any Naya tokens deck. I mean, this is going to be the things you expect to see. Mondrak to double up on the tokens. Niali to give them double strike. Perforos deal 2 damage to each opponent anytime a Sand Warrior comes in. This plus Hazezon will be 4 damage every time a land comes in. Impact Tremors deal 1 every time. Inspiring Leaders and Intangible Virtue to give our tokens a bit of a buff. Tangible Virtue giving them +1/+1 Vigilance. Sparring Leader giving them +2/+2. Paralyze to double up again. Roar of Resistance to give them all haste. That way they're hitting hard as soon as they come down. And then War Leader's Call combines that +1/+1 with that Impact Tremors type ability to give us the best of both worlds. This section I think is really important because I think you could play this deck as just a traditional landfall deck if you really want to. But I think where we will benefit is kind of viewing this as both a landfall deck and a tokens deck and really taking advantage of some of these token passives as well. But it's not just that. We want to play a bunch of deserts, and there's a lot of ways we can do this. Cards like Azusa that let us play additional lands each turn is great because all we need to do is a way to get a desert into the graveyard or multiple deserts in our hand, and then we can play multiple deserts in a turn. Dune Chanter says lands you control and land cards you own that aren't on the battlefield are deserts in addition to other types. This means that every land we have is a desert, every land we play, every land in our graveyard, meaning that we're always going to be getting Hazezon's trigger, and then, you know, gives all of our lands the ability to tap for anything. Elvish Reclaimer can sack a land to go get a land, again feed a land into the graveyard for Hazezon to play it back out, or, you know, just continue to get us the right land we may need at the right time. Living Twister is a fun one, can return a tap land we control to its owner's hand. How I ideally see this working, if you wanted to, is tap a desert, bring it back to, you know, for mana, bring it back to your hand, and then play it again with Hazezon out. Or we could pay 1 and a red to discard a land to have it deal 2 damage to something. That could then put a desert in our graveyard for Hazezon to be able to play it back out of our graveyard. So I like Living Twister a lot. I think it's a creature that makes a ton of sense. Mina and Den seems kind of fun. You get to play an additional land, and then you can bounce land back to your hand to give a creature trample. We have a couple creatures that get really big depending on the number of lands we control. And here we just scoop a desert back up into our hand, play it again, and get more Sand Warriors. And then same thing with Oracle Moldaya, play additional land, but we can play lands off the top as well. Again, just trying to just get more lands in. The thing I think is important about these playing additional lands is if we have deserts in our graveyard, or if we have any way to get deserts into our graveyard or back into our hand, we're going to be able to play them again and again and again and take a real advantage of getting those Sand Warriors and get them going. Perennial Behemoth and Remnant Excavator just allow us to play lands from our graveyard. These are just here because if something ever truly happened, Hazezon, or we needed to get lands back out to try to use other types of lands, we could do that. I don't think they're as relevant the more you push towards deserts, but the list I have has a few other, you know, non-desert lands, so it's still important to have them there. And then, of course, Yuma's a slam dunk. Our deck already cares about the deserts, and Yuma's a great card to support Hazezon in that sense. It allows us to sack those deserts to draw cards and then, you know, put them back in. And then it does make 4/2 plants every time a desert goes into the graveyard, which then the cool part about those plants is they do synergize with the Avenger of Zendikar, which seems pretty fun as well. Zuran Orb is an absolute free way to sacrifice lands. Plays really well with Hazezon to just sack the same desert and bring it back as many times as you can play a land. Life from the Loam is a pretty classic graveyard land card, allowing us to, anytime we would draw a card, we can mill 3 and put Life from the Loam in our hand instead of drawing. Maybe dredge some deserts into the graveyard. If we have Yuma out, it'll trigger that. Otherwise, Hazezon would potentially have some deserts to play from our graveyard. And then Life from the Loam can just pick the lands back from our graveyard to our hand, get it into our graveyard again, and just keep dredging it. Keep getting those lands, keep doing those things. If you are familiar with Gitrog, you know, the Gitrog style of landfall deck, you'll know Life from the Loam. But here we get to really take advantage of it, especially if we have Yuma as well. And then the Growth Recon, being our upkeeper, we can turn a land from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Again, Hazezon doesn't care when the land comes in, so Undergrowth Recon can be great to always make sure we're feeding that and having it available to bring something back. Well, no deck's perfect. I've said it plenty of times on this show, and I don't believe this deck is perfect by any means. I think there's a lot we can learn in testing, and these are 3 cards that I really, really wanted in the deck. I just couldn't find a spot for it. The one I wanted the most was Goblin Trenches. This is a card that I think makes a ton of sense in the deck. Pay 2, sack a land, make 2 1/1 Goblin Soldiers. It gets a way to consistently get deserts into the graveyard. I just wasn't sure what else to cut. Dance of the Tumbleweeds is from the new set. Makes a ton of sense. It can get you a desert for 3 mana, for 7 mana, or for 6 mana. You get an XX Elemental as well. It just makes sense. I feel like that's what the deck's trying to do. It was hard to trim our ramp down to the point that we can make sure we're functionally getting all of our colors, but also getting everything we need. In the case of the Locked House, It's just Haha's is just a card I really like. You can play additional lands, and once you get to 7, you can play lands, creatures, and enchantments from the top. I really, really like this card. I just stared at a who's who of Naya landfall and just wasn't sure what to cut. I'll spoil it. I do plan on giving Hazezon a shot for myself. It seems like I've been really loving my Naya decks as of late, and I've always wanted a good landfall deck. I think I'm going to give this a shot, start testing it, see if it's something I really enjoy. And I will tell you, I think Goblin Trenches and Lockhouse come probably right in away because I want to test them and see where they're at. But let's get into our play tests. First one here, we're keeping a 3-lander, 3 deserts. We see Oboon, Parallel Lives, Scoot Swarm, and Any Joins Up. So Any Joins Up can actually double up Hazezon's trigger, which is really cool. Turn 1, we see a Cinderglade. So this is cool because we can try to save these deserts for as long as possible to make sure that Hazezon can get down before we see them. At the moment, we're going to need to play probably at minimum the Indomitable to get Hazezon down, but we don't have to decide that yet, so I'll just put the Cinderglade in tapped. No reason to make any decisions yet. Cool, we see a Sunpetal Grove. This is perfect because now we can play this Plains down turn 2. Nothing to do turn 2, which is okay, but now we Sunpetal Grove next turn, get Hazezon down, and then we have 2 deserts to play to really take advantage of his ability. So turn 3, we get that Sunpetal Grove down, get Hazezon down, which is great. Now, as long as Hazezon survives back to our next turn, we can get to rock into our tokens and get this party going. We draw another desert, which is great. The only bad part is that 2 of our 3 deserts come in tapped, so I think I would play the Survivor's Encampment here. Mainly because the reason there is because now I can use that mana to play something like Oboon, which can start setting up that value engine, making lands and making them pretty big. Any Joins Up seems like it would make sense. We may miss on its original trigger, though, so that would kind of suck, but it would start doubling up our abilities, which seems pretty good. We could Scoot Swarm here and get that running. I really like Oboon. I think Oboon's a really fun creature, and it could be a kind of an alternate commander for us here. But I think Parallel Lives isn't a bad choice either, and I think that's what I'll go with just to be safe. Now we're making 4 Sand Warriors instead of 2, and we can get the party rolling. This turn we draw a Cruised Heath, which is probably what I would dump in here. This is gonna, well, let's think about this. Should we play something first? I could play Any Joins Up, and we're making 4 sands off the first trigger, 4 off the second trigger, 8 sand warriors total. We could play Oboon and get the Any Joins Up down later, and that would double the Oboon trigger. Ooh, that actually seems kind of cool, right? Because then it would double Hazezon and it would double Oboon. But I could see the argument for just dumping Any Joins Up in now and getting 8 Sand Warriors, and we could always play Hazezon right next, we could always play Oboon next turn before we drop a land. I think that's what I would do. Drop in the Cruised Heath. The first trigger gives us 4, the second trigger gives us 4, so now we're up to 10 Sand Warriors. And again, now all we're looking for is any way to buff these guys, any ways to make them just a little bit better, which we have one in that Beastmaster Ascension. We could potentially play next turn, turn them all into 6/6s and get them rocking. But I think that's what I would do. This is great. Now Hazezon can... all we need is just, again, one more turn. And if our board's free right now, if our board's ready to go and no one's messed with it, I think we just Beastmaster Ascension and get to stepping. Again, those all become 6/6s. Now, I mean, whether we send 3 of them at everybody or, you know, we can decide really game up on somebody and get it going. You know, I would do that for 3 mana, leave up enough mana for Heroic Intervention, and then, you know, make the attack. Maybe some of them die. That is what it is. You know, play the desert, make 8 more Sand Warriors. And again, we're just... We leave the Heroic Intervention up to protect the board, and we're probably at a lethal point now where our opponents have to either deal with the Beastmaster Ascension or the game's over. Let's get into game playtest number 2. Keeping a 5-lander, which isn't that big of a deal, especially since we have 3 lands we can play before we get Hazezon down to make sure that we can really get the best of those desert triggers. So we'll put the Jungle Shrine in turn 1. Turn 2, get the Forest down, and then turn 3, get that Plains down and get Hazezon down, get it started, get it ready to go. This turn, Let's see. Recon's not a bad card, but we don't have anything in our graveyard, so I think I would just Inspiring Leader, get the backwoods down. That's going to give us 2 Sand Warriors. So now these Sand Warriors are 3/3s because of the Inspiring Leader. And cool, now we're 1 turn closer to just really hurting our opponents. You know, they're 3/3s, which is going to make them even better in combat. We could swing there with Hazezon at somebody if we think it's relevant, but I'm going to guess probably not. This turn, I mean, we can get that 5th mana. I guess we can play the Recon. I mean, we kind of have nothing else to play for the mana. Get the Dizzids, get the Dunes of the Dead in, which is going to get us 2 more Sand Warriors. Dunes of the Desert has a kind of fun ability if we can pair it with an land sacker. It says when it leaves the battlefield, goes to the graveyard from the battlefield, we make a 2/2 zombie. So that could be pretty cool if we can find something that can sacrifice a land. But here we go. Swing in with our 2 Sand Warriors if we have a good spot for them. Ooh, Hour of Promise feels great. So I would say get the Mirage Mason down, get 2 more Warriors, and I would just Hour of Promise. We go get any 2 lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then if we control 3 or more deserts, we make a zombie. Well, we have 3 deserts right now, but I would just go get something that we can take real advantage of. I think right here, if you're playing with a little bit of a higher budget, something like Lotus Field would be really good right here. Come in, sack a couple lands, sack the deserts, you know, and be able to play them back out right every turn with Hazezon. That might be something that, you know, of course, might be worth looking into. We'll get the Cactus Preserve. What's it? 2 lands. Yeah, I thought I had a Lotus Field in here. I apologize, but it looks like I don't. So that would be probably would be Slam Dunk, my other target. I do like the idea of some of these deserts that sacrifice themselves, just so that way we can get a we can keep, you know, we could then sacrifice and get them back out. But we get 2 more zombies from that, and we get 4 more Sand Warriors from the two coming in. Our Promise does put them in taps. So we're not going to get them that turn, but that's okay. Take a big attack at somebody there. I think it's well worth it. Here we see Cradle, which is pretty good. We have enough mana for now, so I probably want to get it down. And then I guess play my land, get the Sand Warriors, attack with some Sand Warriors. And again, now we're just waiting for some other way to really, truly, you know, if we wanted to go even wider. But the truth is, there's 2 more Sand Warriors. We can sack Cradle to make a zombie if we want to, and then kind of bring it back out. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7. That would get us that would get us those and the Elemental. And then, you know, if we had the extra mana next turn, we could sack the Accursed to bring it back in, sack the Accursed to bring it back in. More landfall triggers, more fun. And, you know, I think you can kind of see what I'm trying to do there. Let me know, what do you guys think of Hazezon down in the comment section below. I don't think I realized that I didn't have a Lotus Field in here. So that might be something I would consider. Any land that I think can sacrifice the deserts and then be able to play them back makes a ton of sense. I think that's something I missed originally in my notes, and I think that'd be something I'll look into for my personal version that I'm going to try. But let me know what you think of Hazezon down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next.